They thought Earth would beg for mercy when threatened by the Galactic Council. Instead, Earth answered with silence, and a sky full of missiles. Subscribe for more powerful stories where humanity doesn't just survive. They said it was a warning. The message came wrapped in layers of diplomacy, softened with carefully chosen words. But humans knew what it was. The Galactic Council had delivered a threat. Not a demand, not a negotiation, an ultimatum. It arrived encoded in a multi-spectrum transmission, decoded by Earth's most advanced systems in seconds. The core of the message was simple: disarm. Withdraw your fleets. Cease militarization. Or face containment. The word containment echoed across every nation like a curse. Earth had seen that word before, in its own history, always the prelude to occupation, to war, to domination under the guise of peace. But the Council didn't understand what that word meant to humans. They didn't understand what kind of people had built civilizations under constant threat. What kind of species had survived their own brutality to reach the stars. They assumed silence meant submission. But Earth wasn't silent out of fear. In war rooms deep underground and aboard orbital command hubs, leaders didn't argue. There were no fiery debates. There was only stillness. The message had unified them, not in panic, but in focus. Because every human instinct had been sharpened over centuries by one truth. When someone says they're coming to control you, they already believe they own you. In a modest apartment in Karachi, a grandmother watched the news scroll across her screen and quietly turned it off. She had lived through human wars. She knew what came next. She held her granddaughter tighter and whispered a prayer. Not for peace, but for strength. All across the globe, a strange calm settled in. Like the moment before a storm breaks. No message was sent back. No delegation responded. Earth went silent. But silence was never emptiness. It was the inhale before the strike. In orbit, long-dormant systems lit up. Autonomous surveillance drones rerouted. Defense satellites calibrated. Across continents, bunkers locked down and factories changed protocols. The civilian sectors weren't told anything. They didn't need to be. Earth didn't operate like the Council. There would be no grand performance. No threat-filled broadcasts. Just movement. Precision. Consequence. In the Council chambers, some took Earth's silence as capitulation. One ambassador, a violet-skinned diplomat from the Vexari species, smirked and proposed a timeline for fleet deployment to ensure compliance. Another scoffed that Earth's refusal to respond was typical barbaric pride. The elders remained silent. Not out of agreement, but because some of them remembered. Faint echoes of past encounters buried in records scrubbed from official memory. A few knew that humans were dangerous not when they shouted, but when they said nothing at all. Back on Earth, a man in a wheelchair rolled quietly through a hall lined with digital maps. Retired Admiral Kale had fought the border skirmishes 30 years ago, back when Earth's name barely registered in the Council. Now, he stared at the updated readouts, fleet positions, orbital deployments, enemy patterns. His fingers didn't tremble. They pressed a single command line. Protocol Skyfire. Initiate silent readiness. The AI didn't ask for confirmation. It knew better. The command propagated like a virus, unseen but everywhere. Subterranean arsenals unlocked. Warships parked as research vessels reclassified themselves. Combat AIs returned from deep sleep. But no missiles were launched. No weapons fired. Not yet. Because Earth didn't strike out of fear. It waited. In a school in Nairobi, a young boy asked his teacher, "Are we going to be okay?" She looked out the window, up at the sky, and answered honestly, "We always are. But not because they let us be. Because we choose to be." Her voice didn't shake. Across news feeds, the people of Earth didn't riot. They didn't cry. Instead, they organized. Not in rebellion, but in readiness. Humanity was acting as one species. The last time that had happened, the stars were still out of reach. At a secure lab in Brazil, an AI architect watched a simulation of Council fleet movements. The system predicted Earth's annihilation in under 4 days, if Earth remained passive. She closed the simulation and opened another, one not bound by traditional rules of engagement. The numbers changed. Suddenly, Earth had a 72% chance of full deterrence with less than 5% civilian casualties. The variable? An immediate and asymmetric response. She sent the report. No discussion followed. Only an automated acknowledgement. Stand by for approval. Humanity had always been a contradiction, brutal yet compassionate, impulsive yet calculating. But it had one universal trait: it never accepted being cornered. Threaten Earth, and Earth would not beg. It would not yield. It would not bow. It would prepare. In the void of space, Earth's ships didn't gather. They disappeared. One by one, they flickered off public sensors. Not because they were gone, but because they didn't want to be seen. The Ghost Fleet, long denied as rumored by Council intelligence, had begun to move. And still, no reply came. The Galactic Council sent Earth a threat. Earth didn't send a warning. It became one. The mistake was opening the file. Council analyst Varric wasn't supposed to dig that deep. He was just a mid-tier intelligence compiler, assigned to monitor low-risk threats. Earth wasn't even marked as active hostility. The file was locked behind Elder-class encryption, stamped with a red sigil no one had seen used in centuries. But curiosity, that most human of diseases, had infected him too. The decryption took seconds. What it revealed didn't make sense, at least not immediately. The first record was ancient by Council standards. Dated before Earth's first recognized contact. It was a shaky transmission from a scout vessel, visuals of primitive nuclear explosions, electromagnetic pulses ripping across continents, cities engulfed in fire. The report ended mid-sentence. The crew was never recovered. Other logs followed. One described a conflict called World War II, a time when humans had not even reached orbit. They had firebombed entire cities, executed tactical deception at global scale, and ended the war by unleashing what the Council had once called barbaric planet killers. They had used atomic weapons on themselves. Varric kept reading. There was footage. Helmet cameras. Radio logs. Screams. Combatants dragging their bodies through chemical fog, blind and burned, still firing. One line from a soldier's dying breath was tagged by an elder AI. If I can't crawl, I'll bite. Just point me toward the enemy. That soldier had no name. But his quote was engraved in the psychological warfare section of the Council's strategic archives. The deeper Varric read, the more the image of humanity shattered. It wasn't just their capacity for violence. Every species in the galaxy had that, in some form. What terrified the Council was how humans adapted to it. They ritualized it. Documented it. Trained for it across generations. They turned war into a science, and survival into an art form. He found data on something called the trench wars. Soldiers living in filth for years, launching suicidal charges not to win, but to deny the enemy peace. Records of frozen dead clutching rifles as their bodies fused to the soil. Earth's history wasn't a timeline. It was a graveyard with mile markers. Another report chronicled Earth's Cold War period. For over half a century, humans lived under the daily threat of global annihilation, nuclear weapons on standby, hair-trigger systems designed to obliterate entire continents. Not only had they survived it, they'd normalized it. No other species had done that. In one hidden log, dated during Earth's early space age, a Council stealth probe recorded a human general speaking privately. The worst thing they can do is assume we're civilized. We're not. We're just tired. That was the moment Varric understood. Earth wasn't a death world. Earth was a crucible. And humanity wasn't angry because they were unstable. They were angry because they had been forged that way. Near the end of the file was a timeline scrubbed from public record, a minor Council incursion into the Sol system, over 100 years ago. A single scout fleet entered the Kuiper Belt. It vanished. No distress signals. No debris. Only a final sensor ping, reading a primitive mass driver accelerating a metallic object at relativistic speed. One of the Council's own flagged it as impossible. No species below Tier 3 could have built that. The file was sealed after that. Silenced. Varric closed the report, shaking. It wasn't his place to alert the High Council. But he forwarded one line to his supervisor. If they haven't changed, we're not sending a warning, we're digging our own grave. Elsewhere in the Council, a minority of elders already knew this. One of them had once whispered, asterisk, "Humans have no biological edge. Their bones are fragile. Their flesh soft. But they are the only species that evolved to run toward fire. Not away from it." Asterisk. Some members had tried to erase this knowledge. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Because Earth's entire history was a warning they never heeded. They believed humans would become like the others once they joined the galactic stage, tamed, enlightened, controlled. But humans didn't evolve to be controlled. They evolved by resisting control. The final page of Earth's dossier was not a report. It was a quote, placed there centuries ago by an anonymous elder. They will not ask for peace. They will not cry for mercy. They will wait. And when they rise, none of us will be ready. Varric, breaking every protocol, added his own note below it. Then why in all the stars did we threaten them? The Council believed time was on their side. After the warning had been sent to Earth, they moved into deliberation, convinced that humans would do what every other fledgling species had done, respond with panic, bend under pressure, plead for inclusion. Instead, Earth said nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. No ambassadors arrived. No envoys. No message at all. To the Council, it seemed like defiance wrapped in silence. To those paying closer attention, it was preparation. The High Chamber convened in full session, a rarity reserved only for high-risk threats. Earth had never qualified for such classification before, but their rapid militarization had disturbed several border members. Some demanded immediate sanctions, citing intelligence showing Earth's weapons production had increased by 37% in the past cycle. Others urged caution, arguing Earth's response might still be diplomatic in nature. But the divisions ran deeper than debate. Behind closed doors, alliances shifted. The Tuvareg Syndicate, known for their massive fleet construction yards, quietly offered support to those leaning toward military intervention, contracts, refits, covert assets. Meanwhile, the Sul, a pacifist species, proposed a compromise: grant Earth temporary observer status in exchange for disarmament. It was all theater. Humanity, watching from afar, didn't waste time interpreting alien politics. Their silence wasn't indifference. It was focus. On Earth, civilian industries rapidly pivoted to dual-use production. Commercial fusion reactors began supplying orbital foundries. Subsurface transport tunnels reallocated space for troop movement corridors. Orbital stations previously dormant sparked to life, running diagnostics on systems mothballed for decades. Automated facilities once designed for lunar mining shifted to manufacturing hull plating. None of it made headlines. None of it needed to. The Global Command Network, an AI-augmented matrix that required no central authority, activated under Protocol Grey Light. No speeches. No declarations. Just execution. The machines didn't simulate diplomacy. They simulated outcomes. And every branch of prediction pointed to one conclusion: war was inevitable. Back in the Council chambers, a motion was proposed to send a second warning, this time with a timeline for compliance. It failed by one vote. Too many factions were hesitant. Some saw Earth as a potential ally against rival blocs. Others feared escalation. But more than a few had already begun positioning fleets nearby, under the guise of patrols. The Council's most powerful assumption was that Earth wouldn't strike first. They misunderstood humanity entirely. The Ghost Fleet, Earth's Black Ops Navy hidden across asteroid belts, hollow moons, and unregistered orbitals, began moving without emitting a single pulse. Powered by zero-signature engines and coordinated by dark AI systems, they didn't need commands. Their role had always been deterrence through uncertainty. Now, their purpose had changed. No declaration of readiness was issued. Earth's doctrine had no room for that. Instead, redundancy layers kicked in, civilian satellites integrated into defense nets, educational AI platforms repurposed for population-level psychological readiness, ancient nuclear silos updated to kinetic strike platforms with orbital capability. Earth did not prepare like a power about to go to war. It prepared like a species that had already accepted it. One council strategist noted a disturbing pattern. Earth's targeting systems, once purely defensive, had been reoriented in predictive strike configurations. They weren't pointed at random council assets. They were aimed at weak points, logistics hubs, communication relays, unmanned refineries, strategic, surgical targets that would cripple infrastructure without provoking mass casualties. It was military doctrine taken to a level few species ever practiced, overwhelming disruption with minimum bloodshed. Terrifyingly precise. Still, the Council hesitated. They launched probes, attempted deep scans, even tried subtle diplomatic feelers through neutral species. Earth responded to none. That was the final warning they ignored. Behind Earth's silence wasn't indecision, it was math. Statistical certainty. Simulations running in quantum time loops showed that if humanity waited any longer, they'd be surrounded. So Earth adjusted the timeline. Not to win, but to control the terms of what couldn't be avoided. The Council believed they were managing a wild card. Earth had already moved 3 pieces ahead. The final act of misjudgment came when a Council diplomat publicly referred to Earth as an emerging threat with delusions of equality. That quote was rebroadcast across Earth's infonets. No rebuttal was issued by any Council representative. The words weren't interpreted as arrogance. They were read as confirmation. Earth knew then that no amount of readiness would be enough. The Council had already decided who humans were. So humanity stopped waiting. No committee approved the shift. No public declaration was made. The Ghost Fleet disappeared entirely from known positions. Earth's Black Ice AI systems initiated Phase 1 of Contingency Protocol, message delivery, not by words, but by precision. A message made of speed, silence, and fire. As Council factions bickered and postured, Earth prepared to speak in the only language the galaxy had ever respected, force with purpose. And still, they said nothing. The first missiles were invisible. They moved without signature, without trajectory alerts, without any of the expected telemetry that normally preceded an interstellar strike. Dozens of launch points, hidden within asteroid fields, moons, derelict mining stations, activated in perfect sync. Every missile was shielded, layered in adaptive camo, moving faster than the Council's defensive networks could calculate. No war declarations. No warnings. Just motion. Their targets were not cities or capital ships. Not planets or biospheres. Earth didn't seek massacre. It sought clarity. The first detonation occurred on Raxon 3, a Council refueling depot positioned far from populated systems. It lit up in silence, its communication arrays wiped out before sensors even registered impact. Simultaneously, 23 other sites across Council-controlled space went dark. Surveillance outposts. Listening stations. Empty carriers mid-transit. All hit with surgical strikes. No loss of life. Only silence. On the Council's internal network, confusion spread like infection. Dozens of AI sent malfunction reports. Defense nodes flagged anomalies. Entire sectors blinked offline. No enemy fleet had been detected. No ground forces spotted. Just a string of missing infrastructure across half a dozen systems. The data was too perfect to be random. Too bloodless to be piracy. Too fast to be natural. Then Earth's message arrived. It was 3 seconds long. No images. No audio. Just a transmission key encrypted in the same protocol Earth used to receive the original Council threat. Inside was a timestamp, marked precisely with the moment of each strike. And one line, Asterisk. We heard you. Consider this a whisper. Asterisk. That was it. No demands. No speeches. No context. Just evidence that Earth had seen the Council's move, and replied in kind, not with equal force, but with superior intent. Panic didn't spread immediately. At first, the Council refused to believe Earth had the capability. Their intelligence had rated human weapon systems as advanced, but within predictable thresholds. None of them had anticipated planetary launch sites buried so deep, hidden so well, or synchronized so precisely. None had calculated that Earth could strike without ever crossing a border. Behind closed doors, the inner circle assembled. Military leaders, elder observers, and senior analysts argued in spirals of speculation. Some suggested rogue actors. Others accused human allies of aiding the assault. A few said the obvious: Earth had never disarmed. It had simply hidden in plain sight. What terrified them wasn't the damage. It was the restraint. Not a single civilian casualty. Not a single strike on political or economic centers. Not even retaliatory defense systems had been triggered. Earth had not lashed out emotionally. It had chosen targets with strategic perfection. Each hit sent a message: asterisk, we know where you are. We know what you rely on. And we can erase it, quietly, asterisk. In Earth's own military doctrine, it was called initiation by subtractive silence, a philosophy not of escalation, but of removal. To erase the enemy's ability to respond before they realized they were in a conflict. A tactic developed during the orbital skirmishes of the Third Lunar Conflict and perfected by Black Ops Command decades later. Council intelligence scrambled to locate the origin of the strikes. They couldn't. Every launch path had been masked with quantum-level misdirection. The warheads had no identifying markers, no traceable propulsion patterns. Council AI failed to reconstruct trajectories. The only known fact was this: someone had delivered a coordinated strike across multiple sectors, bypassing every known form of detection. And only one species had motive. The debate collapsed. Action replaced confusion. The Council declared a Level 4 alert for the first time in over 3 centuries. This wasn't war. Not yet. But it was something worse, a message that Earth was not intimidated. It was not pleading. And it was no longer reacting. It was demonstrating. Fleet mobilizations were ordered, but not near Earth. That would have signaled fear. Instead, strategic redeployments were cloaked as routine exercises. Supply lines were shifted. Patrols rerouted. Quietly, the Council began reinforcing key outposts, but it was already too late. Earth had chosen where to strike, when to strike, and who to leave standing. Every move the Council made now was reactive. Humanity had seized initiative, not by attacking, but by proving it didn't need to. For Earth, the operation was a success. Not because of damage dealt, but because of the message sent: asterisk, you are not untouchable. We see you. We can reach you. And we don't need to shout, asterisk. This was not the beginning of a war. It was the end of the illusion that Earth could be contained. They had warned them centuries ago. When the Council first classified Earth as a potential contact species, the elders advised restraint. Not because humans were dangerous in the conventional sense. At the time, they weren't. They were fragmented, limited to one planet, warlike but contained. What set them apart wasn't power. It was potential. The kind that didn't follow galactic patterns. They evolved faster. They broke rules. They adapted in ways no algorithm could predict. That's what scared the elders. And why they sealed the file. But warnings faded. Time passed. Earth advanced. From primitive combustion to orbital travel in less than a generation. From divided governments to unified command structures. From war-torn continents to planetary coordination. The Council watched, curious but dismissive. They believed humanity would evolve toward the galactic norm, diplomacy over instinct, compromise over pride. But Earth didn't evolve that way. It grew sharper. Harder. More deliberate. Now, with Earth strikes echoing across Council space, the elders were summoned again, not for consultation, but for confession. One by one, they stepped into the chamber, older than the systems they helped govern, memories heavy with knowledge that had been silenced too long. And they spoke, not to advise, but to warn again. They revealed the first contact incident, buried in sealed archives. A small council probe intercepted a human radio signal decades before Earth ever developed faster-than-light capabilities. The probe was recovered, and with it, a partial archive of human history. Not statistics or scientific data. Culture. War documentaries. Music. Testimonies. One log in particular, a recording of a battlefield surgeon during the Second World War, was played in private session. His words, "We stopped counting the dead. Not because we didn't care, but because we couldn't afford to. We were too busy saving who we could." Another incident followed years later. A rogue Council scout ship entered Sol space without permission. It was cloaked, confident in its stealth systems. It was destroyed by what the Council believed to be a meteor impact. But one elder had his doubts. He showed telemetry data, gravitational shifts near Saturn inconsistent with any natural body. The theory, Earth had already been testing deep space kinetic interceptors. At a time when they were officially still building their first orbital station. None of it was reported. Not to the Assembly. Not to the public. The elders chose silence. They believed, perhaps naively, that humanity would stabilize. That their violence was a phase, not a pattern. But history proved otherwise. Every time Earth met adversity, it didn't collapse. It hardened. Each war refined its strategies. Each disaster refined its resilience. Nuclear winters. Global pandemics. Planetary resource shortages. Other species might have fractured under such weight. Humans evolved. Not by choice. By necessity. One elder presented a forgotten doctrine authored by early human defense theorists, an internal Earth memo labeled Mutual Cognitive Dominance. It outlined a concept simple in structure and terrifying in application. Ensure that any potential opponent, upon observing human conduct, decides unprovoked engagement is not worth the risk. This was not a doctrine of diplomacy. It was a doctrine of deterrence through demonstration. Earth never planned to be the strongest. It planned to be the most dangerous thing to provoke. The silence after the elder testimonies was suffocating. Suddenly, the Council's confusion made sense. Earth had not changed. It had revealed. The strikes weren't a new escalation. They were a calibrated mirror, reflecting the threat the Council had sent in kind. Not with more words, but with exacting proof. Some delegates still clung to arrogance. They claimed Earth's restraint was weakness. Others, now fewer, insisted on a diplomatic reset. But the majority began to understand the truth. They had not sent a warning to Earth. They had triggered a reminder. A reminder of what the elders tried to forget. What frightened them now was not Earth's weapons. It was Earth's discipline. They hadn't retaliated in anger. They hadn't bombed cities or fleets. They had targeted the scaffolding of Council power, quietly, precisely, effectively. A war would be catastrophic. But Earth had shown they didn't need war to cause collapse. They needed intent. The final statement from the eldest among them, a being who had lived since before Earth had electricity, was brief. Humans have never been predictable. They don't conquer the way others do. They don't dominate with fleets. They do something worse. They learn. And now, the Council realized too late. They had just taught humanity how to respond to threats in the galactic language. And humanity had spoken it back, perfectly. No announcements were made when the Ghost Fleet began to move. There were no flashes in the sky, no engine trails, no signals transmitted. What left the Sol system did so in silence, wrapped in cloaking arrays older than any Council technology had ever recorded. To most sensors, the void remained empty. But Earth's most dangerous weapons weren't designed to be seen. They were built to be forgotten. The Ghost Fleet had never existed in official records. Not in Earth's defense logs. Not in orbital registries. Not in Council intelligence. Every vessel was black-coded, off-books, developed across decades under the guise of cancelled programs and scrapped prototypes. The result was a navy without identity, without nation, without flag. It was not a deterrent by presence. It was a consequence in waiting. Each ship carried no crew. Not because they were unmanned, but because their intelligence didn't require flesh. Every one of them housed battle-hardened AIs forged in simulations indistinguishable from reality. These systems had trained against every known Council tactic, every recorded fleet doctrine. And now they were activated under one directive: make the Council understand they were never alone in the void. On Earth, activation logs triggered dormant relay points. Sleeper nodes buried in Kuiper belt fragments powered on, forming a web of silent communications. In deep space, relay satellites disguised as drifting debris synced to the fleet's movement. It took less than 2 minutes for the entire Ghost fleet to synchronize across 17 light-years of space. Council observers, watching from their patrol stations, noticed nothing. Then, something changed. One of their deep-range probes, stationed near a barren planetoid known only for mining remnants, vanished. It wasn't shot. It wasn't jammed. It simply stopped existing. No energy burst. No disruption signal. Its quantum ping collapsed mid-cycle, an impossibility, unless the space it occupied had been forcibly rewritten. That was the first sign. Over the next hour, more went dark. Patrol beacons. Long-range scanners. Recon buoys deployed in sectors not even considered strategically important. The Council's Inter-Intelligence Corps issued a silent flag, not hostile action, presence. That terrified them more. Because it meant Earth was not positioning for attack. It was already there. The Ghost Fleet's core strength was not its size. It wasn't massive. It wasn't even meant for full-scale conflict. Its design was built around superiority of precision, of disappearance, of being where it shouldn't be, just long enough to remind the enemy that there would be no warning next time. Each vessel carried experimental systems. Passive stealth fields that absorbed light without distortion. Armor that warped gravimetric fields to reflect mass signatures. Weapon systems that could deploy and retract in under 2 seconds. Some fired physical slugs accelerated by field disruption coils. Others used information disruption, targeting systems corrupted from half a system away. Not with brute force, but with a whisper of miscalculation. Council fleet captains, reviewing their status reports, began seeing anomalies. Navigation drifted off by fractions. Signal lag increased. Ping echoes returned with inconsistent mass readings. They blamed their equipment. They didn't know Earth's ships had already passed them. One message leaked from a forward Council listening post before it too went dark. The transmission was garbled, filled with static. But one line survived, decoded from the final moment of its AI's operational log. Something is watching. Not attacking. Just watching. Council Command escalated its internal alert status, moving patrol routes and scrambling scout ships. Yet every time they searched, the void returned to normal. As if nothing had changed. But deep within their systems, within sublayers of AI computation, small errors began to spread. Cascading drift in prediction matrices, failure to resolve certain threat assessments. Those failures weren't mechanical. They were psychological, embedded in the AIs themselves. Fear by code. A trace of Earth's greatest warfare advancement. Not weapons. Not ships. But the projection of consequence. The Ghost Fleet's movement through Council space was not linear. It was patternless. Random, but deliberate. Each ship passed within sensor range of at least one major Council military installation. But none lingered. None engaged. Each left behind a subtle disruption, barely enough to be noticed, but undeniable. A message not of threat, but of implication. If this had been an attack, you wouldn't have seen us at all. Earth's command node, far removed from the noise of public diplomacy, logged each movement in silence. No broadcast to its population. No alerts to civilian channels. Even humanity's allies received no insight. Because the Ghost Fleet wasn't just a warning to the Council. It was a promise to the stars. That Earth did not posture. It prepared. The Council, once unified in its belief of human containment, fractured internally. Factions whispered of recall orders, border retreats, temporary ceasefires. Yet none could admit what they all knew: Earth had just walked through their front yard. Quietly. Unchallenged. Unseen. And when it left, it didn't even close the door. Because Earth didn't need to. It had already left its calling card. And now, the entire galaxy knew where it had come from. The vote was never about Earth. Inside the council chambers, after the silent strikes, after the sudden disappearances, after the Ghost Fleet passed through their space like a shadow, everything changed. Not immediately. Not loudly. But decisively. Fear didn't show up in proclamations. It arrived in the pauses between words, in the sudden unwillingness to speak first, in the way the most powerful voices in the galaxy began looking to each other instead of ahead. A vote was proposed. Not to declare war, not officially. That would require full consensus. Instead, they called it a Directive of Response Authorization, legal language that allowed member species to use force at their discretion to suppress destabilizing threats. It passed through preliminary channels without resistance. Until it reached the main floor. There, silence. Council representatives argued procedure. Not strategy. Not ethics. Just rules. Earth's name was barely mentioned. No one wanted to say it. Not anymore. Not after what they'd seen. Not after what they still couldn't explain. 17 critical facilities across 5 sectors taken offline in under an hour, without a single sensor capturing an origin point. The old rules of force projection no longer applied. Still, some pushed forward. Representatives from the more aggressive blocs claimed an action would embolden Earth. One delegate from the Zero Confederacy declared, "They struck at us without warning. What message do we send by letting them walk away untouched?" Another countered, "They already did walk away. That's the message." The floor fractured. Factions emerged, the interventionists, who wanted to mobilize fleets and enforce disarmament by force. The preservationists, who feared escalation and advocated negotiation. And the observers, who said nothing at all. But even among those demanding retaliation, no one volunteered their fleets first. They spoke of unity, of decisive action, of strength. Yet every logistical inquiry was deflected. Who would lead the task force? Which sectors would be the launch point? What level of force was acceptable? There were no answers. Only political camouflage. Because underneath the declarations of courage was calculation and doubt. The vote was called. Each species cast their decision through secured quantum links. Votes were binary. Support. Reject. Before the tally was complete, the council chamber's central projection darkened. An interruption. Not from a delegate. Not from the chair. From outside. From Earth. No signal had been tracked and bound. No hack detected. No access point breached. The chamber's systems simply flicked over, like they had always belonged to someone else. A voice, unmistakably human, filled the room. Calm. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just precise. Your vote is noted. Your intent is understood. And your authorization is unnecessary. No delegate moved. The voice continued. You believe this vote is about Earth. It's not. It's about you. About how far you'll reach, how much power you believe you're entitled to. About how you react when the ones you call lesser remind you that respect is not given, it's earned. And enforced. The chamber stayed silent. Earth had spoken more in those few sentences than it had in the past 20 years of diplomatic contact. And yet the words didn't feel like diplomacy. They felt like finality. The voice delivered one last statement. We are not interested in permission. We are not seeking understanding. We received your warning. You've now received ours. The difference is, we delivered ours to your door. The signal cut off. The vote results came seconds later. A dead split. No majority. No mandate. The directive failed. No one celebrated. Not the interventionists. Not the preservationists. No one issued a statement. Because the vote's failure was not a decision. It was a realization. The illusion of control had collapsed. Earth had removed the central lever of council power, not through fire, not through fear, but through undeniable presence. From that moment forward, the council's unity fractured. Member states began pulling their expeditionary fleets back to home systems. Patrol routes near Earth's sector thinned. Trade routes adjusted. Private communication lines burned with encrypted messages carrying one central theme: wait. Watch. Don't provoke. Among the preservationists, the sentiment was more dire. One delegate stated privately, "We didn't just fail to act. We failed to understand the scale of what we're dealing with." It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about a shift. For centuries, the Council had shaped galactic order. Authority passed through it. Permission granted by it. Wars ended at its word. But now, a single planet had disregarded that authority, and proven that doing so came with no cost. A new precedent had been set. One that couldn't be voted away. Earth had not attacked their homeworlds. Had not occupied territory. Had not made demands. It had simply reminded them that power, real power, was not loud. It didn't beg for legitimacy. It created its own. And now the Council, for all its fleets, its courts, its long-standing procedures, had been forced to realize a truth none of them could admit out loud. The galaxy no longer feared the Council. It feared Earth. And Earth hadn't even started speaking yet. The aftermath of the failed vote rippled across the galaxy with far more weight than any declaration of war ever could. Every major power block within the Council shifted into internal review. Fleets returned home under the excuse of restructuring. Strategic deployments were cancelled quietly. Intel operations that once operated freely near Sol were ordered to stand down. No one spoke of it officially, but the message was clear: Earth's silence was more dangerous than any threat they could speak aloud. Yet behind the curtain, intelligence agencies scrambled. Every species with any reach began digging. Not for answers, they had those. But for insurance. They wanted to know how Earth had built the Ghost Fleet. How it had moved across space unseen. How it had penetrated Council systems without triggering a single alert. And most urgently, how many more fleets like it existed. The truth disturbed them. The Ghost Fleet wasn't a secret project. Not in the traditional sense. It wasn't hidden in one place or bound to a single command structure. Instead, it was scattered. Fractally organized across Earth's military-industrial ecosystem. Developed over decades in modular pieces, each component appearing like an obsolete prototype, a failed test, a decommissioned weapons system. But when combined, those parts formed an architecture far beyond anything the Council had considered possible. The Council's intelligence estimates had been wrong, not by a factor of percentage, but by magnitude. Their models assumed Earth had plateaued technologically. That human advancement would follow the predictable curve of post-contact species, a rush of growth, followed by political saturation, followed by stability. They hadn't accounted for Earth's chaos. That chaos wasn't a weakness. It was a design. Competing corporations, fragmented militaries, overlapping research agencies. Earth didn't centralize its power. It spread it across a web of seemingly disconnected nodes, each driving innovation through rivalry and urgency. No single body knew the full scope of the Ghost Fleet. That was the point. And what disturbed the Council most was this: Earth hadn't revealed its capabilities. It had revealed just enough. Only 17 targets had been neutralized. Only a handful of Council systems were breached. The Ghost Fleet could have done more, much more. That was the conclusion every analyst arrived at, independently. The precision of the disruption wasn't a limitation. It was intentional. A demonstration, not a strike. This led to a shift in doctrine across the galactic powers. Defense budgets ballooned. black site research facilities were commissioned in every major star system. Recruitment campaigns intensified. Stealth countermeasures were rushed into production, even though none of them could match the capabilities demonstrated by Earth. Still, none dared to provoke. And then came the second message. Not a broadcast. Not a transmission. Just a set of coordinates. It arrived simultaneously across hundreds of Council systems, dropped into secure lines that were supposed to be impossible to access. No signature. No code. Just coordinates. Those who traced them quickly discovered what lay at their center. A wreck. A single vessel, clearly Earth origin, left adrift in neutral space. But the vessel wasn't damaged. It was dissected. Intentionally opened, its systems exposed for all to study. A gift, or a warning. The ship's internal AI was inert. Its propulsion core offline. But its architecture was left untouched. Clean. Untampered. It was a blueprint, floating silently in the void. And on its hull, a single line was etched into the metal in over a dozen languages. Understand before you repeat your mistake. The gesture sent shockwaves through military circles. Some interpreted it as an olive branch. Others as a taunt. But all agreed on one thing: Earth wasn't trying to destroy the Council. It was trying to reshape it. The political fallout accelerated. Smaller member species, long under the shadow of larger empires, began opening unofficial diplomatic channels with Earth. Some asked for partnerships. Others protection. Earth didn't respond to all of them. But it didn't need to. Its influence was now viral. It didn't spread by conquest, it spread by consequence. Meanwhile, within Earth's own shadow operations, new projects accelerated. The Ghost Fleet had served its purpose, but it wasn't the end. Just Phase 1. Earth wasn't naive enough to believe the Council would remain frozen forever. Eventually, someone would test the boundaries again. And Earth would be ready. The world's defense networks evolved. Orbital arrays expanded. New construction fields lit up across moons and artificial stations. Autonomous factories deployed in asteroid belts, churning out systems that had no names, only designations. Intelligence-gathering satellites were upgraded to act as silent assassins, eyes that could strike. But none of it was broadcast. No press release. No flag-raising. Because Earth didn't operate like the Council. It didn't seek prestige. It sought readiness. It built in silence. And in that silence, the rest of the galaxy began listening more closely than ever before. By the end of the standard cycle, over 47 species had modified their treaties to remove clauses that allowed for direct intervention in Sol system affairs. 13 trade alliances quietly added Earth to their protected corridor lists. Not because Earth asked. Because it didn't have to. The strategic calculus of the galaxy had changed. No one admitted it aloud, but every war game run and every military think tank ended the same way. A conflict with Earth couldn't be won. Not because of overwhelming firepower, but because Earth wouldn't let the war be seen. And by the time it ended, no one would even remember how it began. Earth's silence remained its sharpest weapon. No declarations, no conferences, no attempts to seize diplomatic platforms. It simply let the galaxy adjust to its presence, and the adjustments came fast. What once was a fringe system on the galactic map had now become a focal point in every strategic dossier. What was once dismissed as a primitive world was now treated as a sovereign enigma. And still, Earth said nothing. But while the Council scrambled to make sense of the situation, Earth continued moving forward on its own terms. Its fleets didn't posture. They vanished into deep space trails. Its diplomats didn't campaign. They declined every invitation to dialogue. And its scientists didn't publish. They produced. The message was no longer about deterrence. It was about progression. Earth was not preparing for a galactic war. It was preparing for a future in which it no longer needed the Council, or feared it. Independent colonies on distant systems began broadcasting their neutrality. Several of them, unaffiliated, once ignored by the Council, began mirroring Earth's technological methods. Modular AI defense grids, decentralized communications, rapid manufacturing platforms. Earth didn't export its doctrines. It didn't need to. Observation alone was enough. What the Ghost Fleet had done was not just create fear. It had introduced a new template for independence. Council-aligned empires panicked quietly. Their populations, long controlled by a slow drip of curated information, were suddenly exposed to rumors, leaks, and intercepted Earth data. Not full files, just glimpses. And glimpses were enough to ignite unrest. In more than 20 member species, internal protests erupted demanding reform, transparency, and new alliances. Earth became a symbol, not of dominance, but of defiance. The Council's response was fragmented. The most powerful species attempted to tighten their control. Surveillance budgets soared. Censorship algorithms hardened. Anti-Earth propaganda surged across all channels. But the damage was already done. The very fact they had to respond proved the power imbalance. The Council had become reactive. Earth remained in control simply by doing nothing further. What no one outside Earth realized was this: the Ghost Fleet was not the result of a single program or decision. It was the product of necessity. Earth had never trusted external powers. From the moment first contact was made and the Council's condescension seeped through every diplomatic channel, Earth's leadership shifted. Quietly. Strategically. The trust deficit became a forge. Suspicion became doctrine. And while the galaxy dismissed them as unpredictable, they mistook layered preparation for volatility. The final blow to Council legitimacy came not from an attack, but a defection. One of the Council's highest-ranking defense strategists, an Uxori named Talven, disappeared from all records. Vanished without a trace. But weeks later, Earth's planetary security grid updated its protocols, featuring structures and algorithms only Talven could have authored. No announcement followed. No press statement. Just a quiet knowledge that one of the galaxy's most respected military minds had chosen to realign himself not with a council of voices, but with a planet that didn't speak. For the Council, this was existential. Talven had been instrumental in designing their failsafes, in balancing member state deployments, in forecasting threat matrices. His defection wasn't just a loss, it was betrayal of the foundational myth that the Council represented order. If someone like him no longer believed in that order, then what was left? Member states began reviewing their own allegiances. Some launched internal audits to root out potential sympathizers. Others issued laws prohibiting direct interaction with Earth or its systems. But the more restrictions they imposed, the more obvious it became that their control was breaking. Earth didn't need to dismantle the Council. The Council was dismantling itself out of fear. In orbit above a Council frontier colony, a message appeared across the local network. No breach. No warning. Just a time-stamped package, encrypted and elegant. It contained a breakdown of the colony's security vulnerabilities, potential external threats, and a full projection of future stability decline. Attached at the end was a simple tag. You're not ready for what's coming. Prepare. Or be replaced. The colony governor forwarded the report to Central Command. But it leaked. Soon thousands of outposts across the galaxy received identical files. All anonymous. All precise. All pointing toward a conclusion that none of the Council's bureaucracies wanted to face. Earth had outpaced them in prediction, logistics, and strategic oversight. And still, Earth had fired no more missiles. Its silence was deliberate. Not passive. Not uncertain. Strategic. Because Earth understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. The one who speaks last shapes the narrative. The Council's constant declarations, accusations, and warnings only revealed its desperation. Earth's restraint revealed confidence. And confidence, in the galactic arena, was power. Earth didn't need alliances. It cultivated influence. It didn't demand loyalty. It inspired emulation. It didn't seek control. It exercised mastery through precision. Every action it took was surgical. Every silence it kept, calculated. Every step forward was a demonstration that control didn't need force, it needed inevitability. The galaxy had grown accustomed to empires that shouted their victories. Now it faced a world that whispered, and the echo was louder than any war cry. The final shift didn't come from missiles, fleets, or displays of dominance. It came from the quiet realization spreading across the highest levels of every government. Earth was not playing the same game anymore. The Council had always operated on a foundation of mutual intimidation, backroom deals, and controlled escalation. But Earth had introduced something far more terrifying than aggression: clarity. It no longer needed to threaten, it had proven its capability, and simply walked away. Diplomatic attempts to re-engage Earth failed repeatedly. Messages went unanswered. Envoys were turned away without hostility, just indifference. Earth had no interest in rejoining a council that once dismissed it. It had moved on. It had built a path forward not with allies, but with leverage. A kind the council had never seen before, earned not through legacy or numbers, but through irrefutable performance. In the vacuum of Earth's silence, others began stepping into new roles. Minor species, previously pawns in the council's hierarchy, started adopting human doctrine. Not just military, but philosophical. Decentralization. Independent manufacturing. Resilient networks that didn't collapse when capitals did. Earth had demonstrated the fragility of centralization. Now the galaxy was adapting. One by one, planets that once followed council protocols began establishing Earth model defense systems. Not because Earth asked. Not because it sold them. But because those systems worked. The logic was unshakable. If the Council couldn't protect itself from a ghost fleet, what hope did a single world have without change? The cultural impact followed close behind. Human literature, art, even philosophical texts once considered primitive were now being studied in universities across half the Council's territories. Earth's refusal to conform had become a spark. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was reconsidering what strength looked like. And it didn't look like bloated committees or ceremonial fleets. It looked like something leaner, quieter, more precise. Council meetings became tense. Blame circulated like wildfire. Old alliances began to fracture. Accusations flew, not at Earth, but at each other. Who had failed to see it coming? Who had underestimated the humans the most? Who had leaked the data that made their failure undeniable? It was no longer about responding to Earth. It was about surviving the internal collapse Earth's actions had triggered. Meanwhile, Earth never stopped evolving. It didn't bask in its influence. It didn't celebrate its ascendance. It treated its rise as necessity, not victory. The projects continued: deep space observation networks, next-gen propulsion systems, subquantum communication fields. Earth wasn't preparing for the Council to retaliate. It was preparing for something beyond the Council. Threats not yet known, voids not yet charted. The greatest fear among galactic strategists was no longer Earth's weapons. It was Earth's foresight. What if the Ghost Fleet had only been the beginning? What if the demonstration wasn't Earth's peak, but a warning fired from the first rung of a much higher ladder? The idea that Earth's capabilities were still in their infancy became a haunting possibility. And no one could disprove it. Earth had revealed only what it chose. It hadn't needed to show its full hand to reshape the board. On the edge of known space, near the rim where few dared to monitor, strange signals began to appear. Not threats. Not ships. Just pulses. Rhythmic, encoded bursts that didn't match any known Council pattern. The signals weren't aimed at Council systems. They were moving outward. Past the mapped galaxy. Into the dark. Speculation erupted. Was Earth signaling to something? Testing deeper ranges? Or was it preparing for contact beyond the Council's reach? The idea was horrifying for some, Earth not only surviving the Council's wrath but now looking beyond it. Past the current era. Past galactic politics. Into the next epoch entirely. The Council, once the centerpiece of galactic civilization, had become a background actor in Earth's story. Earth had no more interest in vengeance or dominance. It had graduated from fear. The message was already written in history, Etched in the ruins of once untouchable power, Earth responds not to threats, but to opportunity. And it builds for what comes after. Every member of the council was now forced to live under a quiet truth none of them dared voice publicly. The most powerful species in the galaxy was not the oldest, nor the wealthiest, nor the most populated. It was the one that had been underestimated the longest. And in that miscalculation, the balance had been forever broken. Earth had sent its warning. Once. It would not send another.